Hello. So I was in the shower and I was thinking about, um, sorry, I have a cough, but I was thinking about like what I'm going to do after graduation and everything because I'm graduating next week. And I was like, I would love to have a home where I could have people over for dinner because I'm very hospitable. One of my favorite things in the whole world is having people over for dinner. And I was like, it would be so fun to have like Friday night Shabbats with all of my friends, just because that's something that I've really enjoyed learning how to do. And anywho, that just got me thinking about, the 10 Commandments and like the Sabbath. And then I was reading the other day about I think it's in Acts. I was reading in Acts about how, as there were like more and more Gentile believers, they had like a big council meeting about whether or not Gentile believers needed to convert to Jewish customs, and they basically decided that they didn't have to do all the Jewish customs. But actually, let me just find it. But there was like one or two that they needed to follow. Wait a minute. Blah, blah, blah. No. That's not right. No. I don't really remember. Ah, yes. Here it is. It's it's Acts 15. And blah, blah, blah. Blah, blah, blah. Oh, basically they decided in Acts 15:19 through 21 that they therefore my judgment is that we should not trouble those of the Gentiles who turn to God, but should write to them to abstain from the things polluted by idols, and from sexual immorality, and from what has been strangled, and from blood. So, for from ancient generations Moses has had in every city those who proclaim him, for he is read every Sabbath in the synagogues. So, there was just like a couple things that they had to do, but they didn't have to like follow the 613 laws, or maybe it's 621. It's 600 and something, but which is the same amount of pieces of a pomegranate. That's a random fact, but there you go. So I was just thinking about how the Gentiles didn't have to follow the Jewish customs, as there were like more believers coming into that what was seen at the time as like a sect of Judaism post Jesus. So anyways, so then I was thinking about like there's all these, if we don't have to follow the laws, then do we have to even follow the 10 Commandments? Because like we all think that committing adultery is wrong, right? But like what about keeping the Sabbath? Oh, that's why I was thinking about it in the first place, right? Because I was like, Christians, like modern Christians, we don't have, we don't follow the Sabbath traditions. So we're just gonna like cherry pick. Like if we think that we need to follow the 10 Commandments, are we just like cherry picking which ones that we follow or not? Because it kind of seems like it, right? Like we don't follow the Shabbat customs. But anyways, so then I was like, well, what if you grouped the 10 Commandments into themes? Because I feel like a lot of times we get too warped up in the details of stuff that we forget like the point. And I felt like maybe like, so what's the point of these laws? Because we see like, well, if modern day Christians don't follow the Mosaic Laws, which in Acts it says, that Paul himself, or was it, yeah, Paul himself, who was a Jewish man, was a part of this discussion of like, I don't really think they need to, because it, whatever, you can go read it for yourself. But what's the heart of the, does that just mean that like God had these rules for these people but not these people? And it's like, well, then what was the point of them? What was the point of the rules? Because the character of God doesn't change, right? The character of God, that he's like a loving God who is wise, and cares for you, like those things don't change. So if God was giving wisdom to like this group of people, like what is the heart of the wisdom? And so I went and I read all the 10 Commandments again. Haven't done that in a while. But the first, like the theme that I noticed was that the first 4 were about honoring God. And the last rest of them are about honoring others. And I felt like keeping the day of rest holy, I felt like that was kind of both. Like if you had a Venn diagram, like some would be honoring God and some would be honoring others. But I felt like that one was kind of both, because you're setting a day apart for God, but you're also honoring others by giving them a day to rest as well. So it's like kind of both. But because like having no other gods besides Adonai, that would be honoring God. Not worshiping any idols besides Adonai, that would be honoring God. Not taking his name in vain, that would be honoring God. And I already explained the Sabbath. Then honoring your mother and father, that would be honoring others. Not murdering or committing adultery, stealing, lying, or or coveting, which is like, that's not a word that we really use these days, but I looked it up and it's more of like a desire, like a lustful, envious desire for something that's not yours. So those things all fall under honoring other people. And so then I was like, this is interesting, because in Matthew, well, it's in 3 places in the Gospels, but in Matthew 22, 34 through 40, Mark 12, 28 through 34, be writing these things down if you want to look at them, and Luke 10, 27, in all of those places, it's like the same story of Jesus declaring what the most important commandment is, because some guy asks him like, what is the most important commandment? And Jesus says to love the Lord your God with all your heart, all your mind, all your soul, and in all your strength too, or something. Maybe that's like the Christian kid in me, like just reciting something that I was told. But let's actually look at it. Because it actually, what he's doing is he's reciting Deuteronomy 6:5 and Leviticus 19:18. But I have to actually go to Deuteronomy. Here. It's the Shema. So it's the Shema. Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. You shall love the Lord your God with all of your heart, with all your soul, and with all of your might. And these words that I command you shall be on your heart. Blah, blah, blah. And then Leviticus 19:18. Blah, 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 not because it's not important, but because you should go read it for yourself. 19:18, which is, you shall not take vengeance or bear a grudge against the sons of your own people, but you shall love your neighbor as yourself. I am the Lord. So, Jesus literally says in these places in the Gospels, like he says, all of the law and the prophets can be summed up in these two commandments. And I was like, that's what I said. I mean, not that Jesus was thinking in the future of like, you know what, Bethany put this well, I'm going to quote her. No. But I did put those things together before I was reminded of the fact that Jesus literally says this himself. And I was just looking at it and I was like, it seems like I can group these things in this way. And then I was like, wait a minute, I think this is familiar. And it is, because Jesus said it too. And I think it's a great point of like a theme that you see across the New Testament, which the New Testament is literally just Jesus coming and being like, hey, here's all my revelation about the Tanakh, like, which is the Old Testament, and he's literally just quoting scriptures from the Torah and the prophets and the writings, and just, it's very interesting. There's like lots of ties. It's like a big spider web, and everything is like all connected, and it's very interesting. It's like the world's biggest conspiracy theory, but it's like all in one book, and it's very interesting. But I was just thinking, like, what is the point? You know, if they had all these laws and stuff that they had to do, but then Jesus like shows up and is like, hey guys, like the whole point was just to love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, and strength, whatever I said before, and to love other people as yourself, then like why did they have to do all this stuff? And then I opened Galatians. And the entire book of Galatians, which it's not really that long. It's only 6 chapters. It's like this page. But this is a letter to Galatians from Saul, which his name never got switched to Paul, okay? It's not a thing. It's like a translation thing. His name is still Saul, so that's what I'm going to call him, just because I'm stubborn about it. But this is a letter from Saul to the Galatians, literally talking about this very thing. The entire letter, so the entire book of Galatians is, because for those of you that aren't as familiar with this type of stuff, which is fine, I call it a book of Galatians, but like this was literally like a letter that somebody sent somebody, and then they like kept the letter and turned it in, put it in here. So this is like if I wrote you a letter in the mail and then you kept it forever and people centuries later read it. But this was to all the Gentile believers in, well, maybe it was Jewish believers too, I don't know. But anyways, whoever they were called the Galatians. Anyways, it's the whole book is all about how, oh my gosh, how Jesus, the purpose of Jesus and the law, and like the difference in if you should be living by the law or living by faith. And it's very interesting because I had this thought of like, what makes us holy, right? What makes us holy? And like, I believe that what makes you holy and what makes you set apart is your faith. And it's interesting because I was reminded of where it says in it's Genesis 15:6. I wrote it down. Good for me. That Abraham believed God and it was counted to him as righteousness. And so right there, it's your faith that's counted to you as righteousness. Like the law didn't exist when Abraham was around, right? Like the Mosaic Law, it's in the name. Like all the people before Moses, they didn't have these laws to be following. What about like Jacob and Abraham, and what about Adam and Eve and all the people in between? You know, if these people really existed, they didn't have the Mosaic Law to be following, but they were still counted as righteous people who were in relationship with God. So how did they do that? How did they do that if they didn't have the law? and it's because they had faith. And so if they had faith, and then we're skipping to here with like post Jesus, and we have faith, and that's our righteousness. Oh, what happened here in the middle with the law? Like, what was the purpose? And it's interesting because if Jesus is what, if faith is what separates us, like sets us apart before Jesus came, how could they like be set apart, I guess, is what I'm trying to say. And it was, you can see like through different biblical themes. I'm not going to go into them all, but it was the law that set Israel apart from the other nations. And it talks, you can just literally read the Bible, and there's just a ton of references all the time about God choosing Israel to be set apart because of the promises that he made to Abraham, and honoring the covenant that he made with Abraham, and which is why he chose Israel, and blah blah blah. But there had to be some boundaries put in place to set these people apart, to make them holy, because to be holy means to be set apart, right? Like this straw is just for drinking, so it's my holy drinking straw. I mean, that's a pretty funny example, but it's just like when something's holy, it's set apart for that purpose and that purpose only. And so if the Israel as a nation was going to be holy, it had to somehow be set apart for Adonai and no one else. And in order to do that, boundaries had to be put in place to make that divide between, like, you are my people, and I'm setting you apart from the other people. And so I think that's where the law comes into play. But the law is, like, really confusing because there's a lot of I just sat here and read through this all. Like, I got on a whole rabbit trail for like 4 hours reading all of this stuff. I know I really have nothing better to do because I'm sick, but a great use of my time. But anyways, like through Exodus and Leviticus, it's just like a lot of laws, and there's like some in Numbers too. I didn't get into all those, but I read through like a lot of Leviticus. Actually, I like read / skimmed all of it, like the second half of Exodus. And, you know, some of these laws, you're like, yeah, that makes sense, right? Like, that totally makes sense. And then some of them you're just like, what? That doesn't make any sense at all. Like, that even sounds like oppressive. And actually, one of the examples that I want to share with you is one that literally just right now, when I was reading it, I was like, this doesn't seem to line up with the character of God, which right there, a great tool for everyone is the best thing that you can do for yourself is to learn the character of God. If you believe in God, then you need to know who he is. And in order to know who he is, you have to know his character. And if we truly believe that his character is consistent, then you have to read through the entire book of Genesis to Revelation to see this character of God revealed. And I would argue that his character can be revealed through the Old Testament. Like, and yes, Jesus builds on his character, and Jesus brings a fuller revelation of his character. But really, like, it serves as almost like this Holy Spirit inspired like revelation of what we already know through the Hebrew Bible, because God's character doesn't change. And so if we know this character of God, that he is steadfast and he is merciful and he is like he shows is something that's again and again and again, which is interesting. something that is, oh my gosh, they're so loud. Something that's highlighted again and again and again through Exodus and Leviticus and Numbers as well. In these same places, these same writings that all these laws are written out, there's also these repetitive mentions of the Lord's steadfast love, and also his judgment. And so there's all of this comparison between his steadfast love and his judgment. And so it's like, God, if I believe that you're loving and that you're just, why am I reading things like Numbers 5, a test for adultery? And if you read this, it sounds like the silliest thing you've ever heard, and you're like, what is this? And I was like, high-key offended, because it's this whole test of like, if a husband thinks that his wife has cheated on him but he can't prove it, then he should go to the priest and have her drink this mixture of ashes and water. Yes, here. And if the water, okay, it sounds horrible. It's Numbers 5:22. May this water that breaks the curse pass into your bowels and make your womb swell and your thigh fall away. And the woman shall say, Amen, amen. Then the priest shall write these curses in a book and wash them off into the water of bitterness. He shall make the woman drink the water of bitterness that brings the curse, and the water that brings the curse shall enter into her and cause bitter pain. And the priest shall take the grain offering of jealousy out of the woman's hand and shall wave the grain offering before the Lord and bring it to the altar. Blah, 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 blah. And when he has made her drink the water, then, if she has defiled herself and has broken faith with her husband, the water that brings the curse shall enter into her and cause bitter pain, and her womb shall swell, and her thigh shall fall away, and the woman shall become a curse among her people. But if the woman has not defiled herself and is clean, then she shall be free and shall conceive children. That's ridiculous. A mixture of water and ashes isn't going to make you infertile. And it's certainly it's certainly not going to tell you if I've cheated on you or not. Like, that physically doesn't make any sense. That's like a ton of superstition. And I read that, and I was like, that doesn't fit my framework. That's weird. Not that I don't believe in the supernatural. I do very much. But, like, this just doesn't make any sense. And it doesn't really follow the, like, the rest of a lot of these laws make, like, logical sense. And, like, this stands out to me because it doesn't make logical sense. And if you haven't noticed by now, I am a very logical analyzer. So I was like, I don't like this. But then I Googled it, and I was like, is there any science behind this? And what I found instead was a great article by this lady who, she's very smart, very qualified. Don't know her name to tell you, but, message me and I'll send you the article. And it was basically saying, like, that you have to put it in cultural context. So there was, like, all of these different trials in other religions at the time, where it was like, if someone does something, then you have to test, and you're not sure. In order to see if they're guilty or not, you have them do these, like, crazy weird things, like, there's one that they mentioned, like, have a woman walk across coals, and if her feet don't get burned, then she's innocent. I'm sorry, but, like, like, if you walk across coals, like, you're gonna get burned. Like, that's a guarantee. So you're just apparently guilty, even if you're not. And just stuff like that. And I don't know. It came up as 10% on my phone, so I don't know if it skipped what I said when I had to click close. But I was basically saying that there are, like, other things in other religions that are very similar to these types of, like, testing you to see if you're innocent or guilty. But it's, like, these outlandish things that would, like, tie someone up and throw them in the water. And if they float, then they're innocent. But if they sink, then they're guilty. And it's like, what? That's stupid. Um, but what's interesting here is the argument is like, of course nothing will happen to them. Because at that time in society, this is how people dealt with proclaiming people as guilty or innocent. So God put this law in place of, all right, you're accusing your wife of cheating, but you don't have any proof, and you're just letting jealousy fester in your heart. I'm going to have you do this stupid thing that isn't going to harm your wife at all. Like ashes and water, like, yeah, it might make your tummy hurt, but it's like not going to make you sick. You're not going to die. You're not going to be infertile. Like, nothing's going to happen to them. And this is my way of, in your cultural context, actually protecting this woman because she's being wrongfully accused of something. So I'm going to put a law in place to where I'm actually protecting them because nothing's going to happen. Because instead of the point that this article made that I was reading was with these other things, in the other cultures, it was like, if they survive, then they're innocent. Where like the supernatural outcome would be that they survive. Where this is strategically different. Whereas it would be supernatural if something did happen to you. Like, the natural thing in this is for you to be fine. Whereas in the other cultures, the natural thing would be for you to be harmed or to die. You know, be burned or drowned or whatever. But like, nothing's going to happen to you. And also I had the thought of like, if they really thought this would happen, like someone who, a woman who really was guilty of infidelity, like she would probably psych herself out and just confess because she's like, I don't want to get sick or whatever. And then a woman who truly was innocent would drink this stuff and believe that she would be fine, and she would be, because even a guilty woman could drink it and be fine. So anyways, that's just my explanation of like, here's a law that like doesn't make any sense, but then when you actually think about it and put it in the cultural context, you're like, oh, okay. I see how this actually does align with God's character. Because knowing God's character allows you to discern. And you really can't discern anything if you don't even know the character of the God that you serve. Because how will you know if things align with his character or not if you don't even know what it is in the first place? And so this is a great example of something that I read and I was like, I don't know about that. And when you see these themes, like when you see these themes throughout scripture, those little checks in your spirit tell you, oh, there's something missing. Like, instead of skipping over it and being like, oh, well, like, I guess I just don't understand, or like, I guess God is evil, actually taking the time to be like, no, I actually want to understand this and dive deeper, because there's something here that's telling me I'm missing an important concept. So, yeah. Anyways, that's just what I was thinking about. Not all of that was in the shower, just the beginning part, which then, like, made me start going on this mind thing of thinking about all these things. And I don't even know what was the point. Oh, I was talking about how the laws are split up into honoring God and honoring others. And that Jesus even makes this point, quoting Old Testament scriptures. And which Old Testament and New Testament, I feel like Old Testament makes it sound like it's irrelevant, which is not true. It's like the opposite is true. The Old Testament is like the original movie, and then the New Testament is like the sequel, and like they're both good, but you can't understand the sequel if you haven't seen the original movie. You know what I mean? And you also can't understand the New Testament unless you understand the Old Testament, because you have no context. And even within that, you can't understand. A lot of people are like, myself included, like very overwhelmed by the Old Testament because we don't understand the context of it either. And that's why it's so important to understand cultural context and things like that. Especially, great example, again, the story I just told you about the funny drink that they had to have. Understanding the cultural context of other societies and cultures at that time in the area, of other religious practices, because there was like tons of other religions being practiced at the same time as Judaism, so it's really important to understand the cultural implications of this, because it really is a lot of this. Honestly, like most of this book is God's commentary on how am I going to set you apart from the other nations around you. That's like the whole point of the laws. Like literally the whole point of the laws is how am I taking you and setting you apart from the world that you live in? How am I claiming you as my own? And then Jesus comes in, centuries later, and is like, I'm actually claiming not only Israel as my own, but I'm claiming all of you as my own. And it changes from being set apart by following the law and following Jewish customs to being set apart by faith. And that, again, I will mention again, Galatians has a lot of good commentary on that, on how we're now set apart by faith instead of by the law. So, anyways, that's 32 minutes of your time being with me, rambling, listening to me cough, and drink my water. So I hope you enjoyed that. All I used for this study was my Bible. This is I think this is the ESV version. Yes, it's my name on it. My mom got it for me. And I also used the Blue Letter Bible app, which is helpful sometimes when I see a word and I'm like, I don't really understand the context of that word. Also, I'm questioning the translation. Like, sometimes I'll read something and I'll just be like, I don't trust that they translated this correctly. And sometimes I come to a different conclusion than the translation I'm reading. And sometimes I'm like, all right, let me be convicted right now. And it's fine. But that's a great app to have. So it really doesn't take much to study this type of stuff. I didn't use any commentaries or anything, just my mind. So all you need to study the Bible is a Bible in your mind, and probably the Blue Letter Bible app, because it's really helpful since it was originally written in Hebrew and Greek. And then, I did Google some things, so I guess I did use some people's commentaries. So just kidding. Maybe get a good commentary or find some reliable resources online to help give you cultural context of things. And get in community. Study the Bible in community, because when you don't study the Bible in community, that's how cults start. So, yeah. Anyways, that's enough for today. Goodbye, everyone. Okay, wait. I had a funny joke that I wanted to share, which is that I was trying to think of what's a good example of like understanding why you need to understand the historical context of the Old Testament and the New Testament too, both of them. And I was like, I need a pop culture reference. And then I thought, it would be like if a civilization in like 5,000 years discovered tapes of The Office. And they were like, what is paper? You would not be able to understand the premise of The Office. And like, yeah, some of the themes would be the same, such as like love and frustration and whatever. Like, some things don't change through time, but things like that, in 5,000 years, will we be using paper? I don't know. But by then, some people might not even know what it is or what it was used for or anything about it. So they have to do a little bit of history about what is paper and why would this be a paper company and what does that even mean to understand the office. And that's like reading the Bible, because we're like thousands of years removed from an entire culture, several cultures, like evolving the culture itself. Within the Bible, it's like thousands of years of evolved culture. And then we're like thousands of years of evolved culture after that. And so if you don't have the resources you need to learn about paper, then you can't watch The Office. And hence, yes, that's all I have to say, and that is my analogy. Okay.